Welcome back to the Engineered Angler. And yeah, I couldn't stand having the blank backboard here, our lure board. So I went ahead and put some of the old classics up there. It makes me feel pretty nice to see them there. And it gives me a little inspiration for our next upcoming lures. But this week, we're not going to make a lure. We're going to be looking at bibs, dive bibs on crankbaits, and a specific style that I've grown to really like, and it actually has become my favorite style of bib. And the thing is, I want to develop a way to make my own. And that's what we're going to mess around with today. And if you're new to the channel, my name's Franco. I'm a professional engineer, a lure designer and lure maker, and an avid fisherman. And I make these videos to share some of the tips and techniques that I've come up with for making lures, and to add a little bit of science and engineering to the art of lure making. Let me show you the type of bib that I'm actually talking about. I keep them in here with all my other bibs. Here we go, we've got a little packet of them. This is what I'm talking about. These are either called wafer board or circuit board bibs. They're super thin and they're made out of fiberglass. Let me get a couple out. So this is what they look like. You can see they're super thin. Let's get a measurement with the micrometer. And they're less than a millimeter. They're at 0.9. And of course, this is what a Lexan bib looks like. And this is about as thin as you're going to see any Lexan bib. Let's see what that measures up. It's about 1.5 millimeters. So even though these little fiberglass ones are about a third thinner than even the thinnest Lexan lips, they are super stiff and super strong and really difficult to break. And why does this matter? Why do I want a really thin bib? Well, one is it's really light. This thing does not overly weight the nose. But my favorite part of this is the actual action it imparts onto the lure. You get that little extra snappy movement just because it's really thin. Let's go to the dry erase board and I'll try to explain why that might be. All right, so not my best work, but you guys get the picture here. This is the Lexan with an exaggerated thickness difference, just to make it easy to see. And of course, that won't be the circuit board or wafer style bib. So what we're looking at is as the water is flowing past the bib, at the very back edge, the flow departure edge, you get vortices forming. And those vortices are what give you that oscillating action when you're cranking that bib back. But the wider this sidewall is, the less dramatic that vortex creation is. And the thinner it is, the more rapidly these vortices develop. And if the angle of attack is right and you're pulling it fast enough, you can actually create cavitation just behind the lip. Now, the fact that there's a difference between the action between these two style bibs is not really argued very much. Most people know from experience that these really thin bibs give you that extra action. And a lot of folks have played around with filing back the edge of their bib, so they're actually sharpened down to a sharper edge. And that also makes a difference. It does change the way the lure acts. And plenty of folks have done that experiment, so we're not going to do it. We know that that's what we want. Today, we're going to figure out a way to make our own. And since these things are made of fiberglass, we're going to make ours out of fiberglass too. But obviously, it's going to take some really fine fiberglass cloth. You can see how absolutely gossamer thin this stuff is. Now, I've got quite a bit of this stuff. In fact, this is just a little cutting from the 2 yards I actually bought. I bought 2 yards because I needed about a half a yard, but I was embarrassed to only buy $1.50 worth. So anyway, I have plenty of this stuff. I don't recommend it this thin. I mean, it's going to work. But you got to put down probably, I'm just going to quickly guesstimated calculation and say it's going to take something like 20 to 25 layers. But if you're going to do this, I don't recommend you use this. I had this laying around. This stuff is 0.8 ounce cloth and I don't really recommend it. I had it laying around. So I would recommend something like a 2 ounce cloth. That'll make it a lot easier to lay this stuff up without making a million layers. While we are going to use fiberglass cloth, we're going to kind of diverge from fiberglass layup and we're going to use UV epoxy resin and not layup resin. It's just something I think most of you guys are already using. So if you want to try this, it'll be easy enough for you to try it. And it sets up quick enough under the lights. And you can even put it under the sun to get it set up. And a nice trick to cut these things nice and neatly is to put a strip of masking tape on it. I want to be sure it's wider than our form, the piece of plexiglass. And there's going to be a little waste, but I'm not too worried. And then I like to cut it right down the middle of the tape. I started off preparing about 17 layers, but I got a little nervous and decided to do a really formal calculation and came up with the number of 27. I ended up actually putting 29 layers on. Then of course we've got to cut the little individual panels too. This is actually turning out to be a lot easier, at least this part, than I thought it would be. Alright, here we have 6 total. And of course, I'm being my typical anal self about this. You could just cut out rough sections and just trim them off later after it's all set. And I'm just gonna stack them up, cut out the rest, and we'll start laminating. All right, let's get these things laid up while we still have plenty of light to set them. And I'm gonna spray the plexiglass and that piece of glass with some mold release spray. You could probably just use some car wax on this. And I'm going to rub some on the edges just in case any of that stuff oozes over. And I'm going to do the layup onto the piece of glass and then take this guy, put him on top, and we'll squeeze them together with some little clamps. And I'm using the same UV resin I use for my clear coats. And it takes very little of this stuff to saturate this cloth. So I'm just going to paint a thin layer onto the glass. And that one thin layer should propagate up through every one of the layers of fiberglass. We might have to add a little bit for the last few layers. Should probably be wearing gloves and definitely want to get the air out as you're going along. And I'm going to try this little roller that I use usually on my foil to see if I can just roll some of the air out of it as we go along here. Yeah, it seems to be working pretty good. No need to hurry because it won't set till the sun hits it. If it's not obvious yet, I've never done this before and I'm coming up with it as I go along. You know, I had an idea. I'm taking some of this same UV resin and I'm tinting it red with some alcohol ink so that the dive bib will already be red. I think it'll look better than just sort of an opaque look. Using that tape to cut out the pieces initially really worked out well, but after I laid up a bunch of them, the tape starts getting in the way, so I started to trim the tape off before I put them on. It added a little work, but I'll know for next time. Yeah, I definitely needed gloves. I'm glad I thought of that red tint. I think it's going to be pretty cool. Well, I'm going to continue doing this. Should take me another few minutes. And then I'll clamp the plexiglass onto it and we'll take it outside to set. Hopefully we still have plenty of daylight. I'm going to put a few more clamps on it and we'll take it out. I'm going to take it down to the dock because there's perpetual sun down there. Look how low the water is. This is the lowest this lake has been in the 20 years I've been here. Look at that. This is nuts. We're in a tremendous drought. I think that's going to work perfect right there. I'm going to go ahead and grab something to eat while that sets. It shouldn't take more than, I don't know, 20 minutes, maybe. And we'll pull it apart. All right, let's see what we end up with. Yeah, all right, that was satisfying. Came off nice. Look how nice and glossy it ends up. That's pretty cool. Now I've got to get the Lexan off. Just hoping that comes off. A little more challenging. There it goes. Oh yeah, there you go. I'm gonna cut off all this other perimeter stuff and we'll start making some bibs. That looks pretty good. Let's get a measurement. 0.94, which is really close to the other one. That's pretty cool. All right, let's go ahead and cut out some nice bibs. I'm going to cut a 3/4 inch round bib and a 5/8 inch round bib. Take it close to the corner. All right, there's our first one. Let's cut the smaller one. Oops, I think I need to slow down a little bit. We'll move on to some clean material here, and hopefully that won't happen again. All right, that got cut out pretty quickly. I think this bit is just a lot sharper. All right, for the next one, I'm gonna cut it out with the saw. And I'm just gonna outline this with this black pen. And that should be good enough. I don't know if you can see that, but I can. All right, I'm gonna make a rough cut of this thing on the bandsaw, and then I'll finish it off with some sandpaper. Unfortunately, I lost the footage of actually cutting it out, but let's just move on. Let's take a look at how it came out. All right, so I want to modify these two lures. This is a little 2-piece swim bait that I made a while back. And this is one of my earliest lures ever. And it is one of the first versions of my Fat Belly, which is a killer lure. The reason I haven't fished it very much is that it's a little slow in sinking. And I think putting a lip on it is going to be the perfect thing to do to it. And what I'm going to do is use the round ones on both of them. The big one for this guy and the little one for that guy. I've already put flat spots on them. All I got to do is cut the slots. And before I cut it, I'll go ahead and draw a line nice and square to it. And with that line drawn, I'll cut the slot with the hacksaw. It should be just the right thickness. All right, that's as deep as I can go, but it should work out just right. Oh yeah, that's gonna work perfect. I'm gonna go ahead and glue that in. That looks great. Now we need to draw the line on the little 2-piece swim bait. All right, that should have it. And to cut it, I'm gonna protect it a little bit with this towel so it doesn't get marred as I'm trying to hold it in place. Got to go a little bit deeper. All right, let's try putting this thing in here. That looks like a pretty good fit. And that looks pretty cool. I think that's going to work perfect. And now for some finishing touches. I'm gluing it in with UV resin, and I've put a little bit on the inside. And now I'm putting a bead just along the edge of the lip. And of course, I'll set it with some UV light. And I'll do the exact same thing with the little swim bait. And if you get a little messy with this, you can always wipe it off before you set it, so you don't end up with a glob. Now, I can finish all this off, put some hooks on it, and we'll take them to the water. All right, we're at the lake. I've just finished tuning this guy. It just needed one little tweak, and this guy didn't need anything. They both swim really nice. This one really hunts. It kind of jerks around, but you don't have to take my word for it. I'm gonna put him in the water and get some underwater shots. So let's go ahead and do it. But I always have to make a couple of fun casts before I go straight to work. Oh, just playing around. And we hooked up. Unfortunately, it's not a bass. He wasn't coming off. So yeah, just a little chain pickerel. Let's get some underwater shots before I lose this lure. of fun. I had a couple of hits, and I would love it if you guys could leave me a thumbs up and let me know what you think about making your own bibs. Is it worth it, or is it just for fun? If you're interested in getting into lure building, click on this playlist of master classes. They're free and they're full of really good information. All right guys, I'll see you on the next one. We'll be building a lure next time.